The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. A very good morning to you. To begin the news, here's a look at the lead stories. Opposition leader Joseph Harmon has given a thumbs down to the government's proposed amendments to one of Guyana's electoral laws. For the first time in the history of the People's National Congress reform, a sitting leader has not been nominated for any position. And in regional news, an embattled member of parliament of the ruling Antiguan party has secured an injunction against his party to debar and replace him. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now the news in detail. Opposition leader Joseph Harmon is rejecting the system being used to select a new chief election officer for the Guyana Election Commission, GECOM, the amendments to the Representation of the People Act, and subdividing Region 4. Mr. Joseph Harmon wants an independent team to hire a new chief elections officer. He says decisions taken by the present commission with a casting vote by the chairman will not be accepted, against the backdrop of the decisions by the Commission during the 2020 elections.
Anytime it comes down to a vote in the Commission, and that casting vote is to be made by the chairman, I'm saying to you, come the chairman, I'm saying to you, chairman of the Elections Commission, that the Guyanese people will have a difficulty accepting decisions in that manner. So please take note. It is not too late, and it is our intention to ensure that Guyanese people have a major say in this matter before the Commission comes to any final decision on who they are going to pick. It's not too late.
Mr. Harmon says the proposed dividing of Region 4 will create an imbalance in favor of the People's Progressive Party.
It's atrocious. And this is just a tinkering with selected portions in what Guyanese will call a wishy-washy exercise. The amendments to the Representation of the People Act principally seeks to carve District 4 into 4 sub-districts. Secondly, it creates a process and system peculiar to District 4 for the tabulation, ascertainment of votes cast, and declaration of results in the said district. The creation of sub-districts only for and in District 4, whilst leaving other districts untouched, particularly Districts 2, 3, 5, and 6, represents the creation of an unequal electoral process and system.
Mr. Harmon says that the opposition will recommend its changes to the draft amendment of the Representation of the People Act. He says the government's draft fails to address the registration of voters.
The amendment fails to deal with the real issues of electoral fraud revealed during the recount of the 2020 elections. The legislation fails to deal with multiple voting, voter impersonation, the improper use of certificates of employment and oaths of identity, measures to prevent ballot boxes being counted and processed without statutory documents, the residency requirement, the creation of a new official list of electors. We are not going back into any elections with that bloated list. And that list must be cleansed by a house-to-house registration process.
The Liberty and Justice Party, a new and united Guyana party, and civil groups have called for an independent system to select a new chief elections officer for GCOM. The government has set aside 6 weeks for consultations on the proposed amendment to the Representation of the People Act. The Working People's Alliance, WPA, has joined other civil groups and political parties to condemn the approach and amendments to the Representation of the People Act being proposed by the governing People's Progressive Party, PPP. In a statement on Wednesday, the WPA said it views the draft proposals as part of a larger PPP plan to gain control of the electoral machinery through intimidation and misuse of its legislative majority to gain unfair advantage over other political contestants. The WPA says the party is outraged that the government would produce draft amendments without first engaging in meaningful consultations with the political opposition and related civil society organizations. The WPA urges the PPP to withdraw the proposals and, as a start, adopt a more inclusive approach with the widest consultations aimed at consensus rather than further confrontation. The WPA says one cannot help drawing a relationship between the ongoing prosecution of senior GCOM staff and the stiff penalties being proposed. The party says the purpose of electoral reform should not be settling scores with political opponents. That party also says the proposal to break up Region 4 into 4 sub-districts is a thinly veiled effort for the PPP to benefit from a first-past-the-post system. It says the proposed draft failed to address the tension between the National Registration Act and the Representation of the People Act, campaign finance reform, GCOM's structure, and the makeup of Guyana's hybrid National Assembly. The courts of Guyana have successfully completed hearing some 3,000 gender-based violence cases of the more than 3,250 cases brought for judicial review. Acting Chancellor of the Judiciary, Justice Yonet Cummings Edwards, while delivering remarks at the University of Guyana's sponsored training for the legal profession, made the disclosure.
In Georgetown Magistrates Court, to date, we have 826 cases that have been filed. In the Diamond Magistrates Courts, we have 539 cases. In Berbice, Wim Magistrates Court, 149 cases. In the East Demerara Magisterial District, 612 cases. West Demerara Magisterial District, 452 cases. Fort Wellington, 180 cases. In Essequibo, 114 cases. In the Lethem, we have 17 cases. In New Amsterdam, 262 cases. In Linden, 149 cases. So a total to date of about 298 cases. I'm happy to say that we would have dealt with or completed about 3,000 out of those 3,298 matters.
The Chancellor also calls for more user-friendly courts with skilled officers to help victims of abuse.
Witnesses who are grappling with the social ramifications, such as being ostracized by some family members simply because they've come forward, sometimes are challenged in making their report or making known to our staff what it is that they're seeking from the court. And so from a practical and professional standpoint, we have to raise the bar. We have to know what it is that is needed in the circumstances and to provide that service to the members of society.
Justice Cummings Edwards also highlights the need to not re-victimize victims while leaning on the courts to help them.
But despite the legislative and social measures, it has been our observation that the courtroom and the court environments can be a daunting place and even harrowing experience for persons who seek justice. And while judicial proceedings are essential in restoring a sense of safety and confidence in bringing some normality to a person's life, inadvertently, these persons are re-victimized when they come to seek justice. A member of society who seeks the protection of the court would need to have judicial officers and other functionaries who can understand their apprehension, who can understand their reluctance, their frustrations, even feelings of guilt and remorse as they make their complaints and they seek the various orders.
The gender-based violence training course was designed by the University of Guyana for the judiciary in Guyana and supported by UNICEF. The course will be covered over a 5-week period to equip judicial officers to skillfully handle domestic or gender violence cases that are before the courts. The incumbent leader of the People's National Congress Reform, David Granger, has not been nominated by any party group for any position. This is the first time in that party's 60-odd-year history that a sitting leader has not been nominated. The PNCR's Congress is scheduled to be held on December 11. The PNCR did not release the number of nominations that each nominee has received, but well-placed Congress Place sources said on Wednesday that longtime party member Aubrey Norton has obtained an unassailable lead ahead of his main rival, Joseph Harmon. One source described Mr. Norton's nominations as a runaway, while another conceded that Mr. Harmon's campaign started late but is returning to win back hearts. The PNCR, in a statement on Wednesday, said the 7 persons have been nominated for the position of leader, 16 for party chairman, 30 for vice chairman, and 18 for treasurer. The PNCR says that all nominees will be written to and requested to indicate by a given date their acceptance of the nominations. It says failure to respond means that their names would not automatically appear on the ballot for the position or positions for which they were nominated. Guyana recorded 4 COVID-19 deaths recently, taking the death toll to 965. The Health Ministry says they include a fully vaccinated 50-year-old man. The Health Ministry's data shows 83 new COVID cases were registered in the last 24 hours. There are 20 persons seriously sick in the COVID intensive care unit and an additional 56 persons being treated and 9 quarantined under observation. The data shows 1,988 persons who tested positive were instructed to isolate themselves at home. The Health Ministry says 393,355 adults are now partially vaccinated, which represents 76% of the population of the adult population, and 264,851 adults, or 51%, are fully vaccinated. The data shows 28,501 children ages 12 to 17 are partially vaccinated and 19,693 are fully vaccinated. The Guyana Fire Service, GFS, is now solely responsible for fire hydrants in and around the capital city of Georgetown. The GFS says the authority and responsibility to inspect, control, and maintain and operate fire hydrants were given by President Irfan Ali. The directives by President Ali ended years of dispute among the Guyana Water Inc., the Fire Service, and City Hall as to which of the agency is responsible for maintaining fire hydrants across the city. The fire service began inspecting and assessing fire hydrants across the city and found that there are 356 fire hydrants. Of that number, 121 hydrants are fully functional but are in need of maintenance, and 235 are out of order. Of the 235 out of order, 182 hydrants require minor repairs and 53 need to be replaced. The GFS is urging members of the public to do their part to ensure fire hydrants remain operable and accessible at all times. And now in regional news. The Privy Council has been asked to overturn the decision of the local Court of Appeal to rule that automatic life sentences given to murder convicts who cannot be executed due to delays in their appeals were unconstitutional in Trinidad and Tobago. Presenting submissions before the United Kingdom-based appellate court, attorneys representing the state claimed that Chief Justice Ivor Archie and 2 appeal court judges got it wrong in 2018 when they ruled that High Court judges have the discretion to decide commuted sentences based on the particular circumstances of each case. The Trinidad Guardian reported that the appeal centers around the Privy Council's well-known 1994 ruling in the Jamaican case of Pratt and Morgan, in which it ruled that the mandatory death penalty for murder would be cruel and inhumane punishment if it was not carried out within 5 years of conviction. The lawsuit was brought by convicted murderer Narish Budram on behalf of 82 prisoners who, like him, had their mandatory death penalty commuted to life imprisonment following the legal precedent set in almost 3 decades ago. British Queen's Counsel Howard Stevens, who led the state's legal team, claimed that the Court of Appeal did not have the discretion to impose any sentence other than life imprisonment on the prisoners whose sentences were commuted. In his submissions, attorney Mark Sipasad disagreed with the position, which he suggested limited the local court's jurisdiction to address breaches of citizens' constitutional rights through Section 14 of the Constitution. Sipasad claimed that when the Privy Council applied the life sentence in the Pratt and Morgan case, it never intended for it to apply to all subsequent cases which benefited from the legal precedent set. The resentencing exercise has been put on hold pending the outcome of the final appeal before the Privy Council. The embattled Member of Parliament, MP for the St. Peter constituency, MP Asad Michael, has secured an interim injunction which temporarily stops the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party, ABLP, from preventing him from attending executive meetings. According to an Antigua Observer News report, the injunction also prevents the ABLP from taking any action with the aim of removing Michael from the party and any attempts to block him from functioning as the duly elected representative for St. Peter. The order added that any decision made on October 22, 2021, the date when he was told not to attend ABLP meetings, shall not take effect while the injunction is in place. The ABLP executive is also restrained from recognizing another constituency branch executive for St. Peter without the knowledge or participation of Michael, who is the sitting Member of Parliament for the constituency. The draft order, dated November 12, was filed against ABLP General Secretary Mary Claire Hurst, Party Chairman E.P. Chet Green, and political leader Gaston Brown. Justice Jan Drysdale outlined that the interim injunction may be terminated after the hearing of the substantive case scheduled for December 8 unless it is extended by the court. The relationship between the embattled MP and the party's executive has been rocky for quite some time. Things came to a head last month when the party's General Secretary, Mary Claire Hurst, wrote to Michael informing him that he was barred from attending future meetings. The letter cited Michael's hostile lawsuits, which he filed in the High Court against the executive members and the party's tribunal. The MP has, however, insisted that despite the widening rift between himself and the party, he has no intention of leaving the ruling party. The government of Barbados has submitted its response to a court case challenging the move by the government to transition Barbados to a republic by month-end. Nation News Barbados reported that Attorney General Dale Marshall said Monday his office submitted the state's response to the injunction being sought by Grenville Phillips II. The AG also disclosed that with just 2 weeks to go before the transition, it is unlikely there will be an actual court hearing and that the presiding judge will render a decision based on the submissions, which are expected to be wrapped up when Phillips submits his rebuttal. The Attorney General says the case will not be done by a hearing because of the urgency of it. Instead, it will be done based on parties' submissions. He says both parties in the matter are making submissions, which the judge will pursue and hand down a ruling. AG Marshall posited that he prefers the judge rules before the transition takes place. He says unless an injunction is granted, the transition will go ahead as planned. And now for the international news, the latest coming from the BBC World Service.
BBC News. Hello, this is Jerry Smith. The number of daily COVID-19 cases registered in Germany has risen sharply to 65,000, by far the highest figure since the pandemic began. The German parliament is debating further measures to control the virus as health officials clamour for tougher action. Lothar Wieler, the head of the country's infectious disease agency, the Robert Koch Institute, said he was deeply frustrated.
Wir laufen momentan in eine ernste Notlage.
We're currently heading towards a serious emergency. If we don't act now, we're going to have a really bad Christmas. It's a very clear message, but after 21 months, I just can't bear it any longer that it's simply not recognised what I and many other colleagues are saying.
Several other European countries have already tightened restrictions as cases continue to surge. The Women's Tennis Association has said the world needs independent and verifiable proof that the missing Chinese player Peng Shuai is safe. The tennis star disappeared from public view after accusing a former senior Chinese leader of forcing her to have sex with him. An email, supposedly from Ms. Peng, has been sent to the WTA claiming she's not missing but simply resting at home. The note also retracts the sexual assault allegations. Yacho Wang of Human Rights Watch told the BBC the email was highly suspect.
The language is so generic. It says, I'm fine, I'm not missing, no, am I unsafe. There's no personality, there's no real voice in it, especially if you compare it with Peng Shuai's original post on Weibo. There was such a personality, there was such a story, there was such emotion.
24 aid workers have gone on trial in Greece charged with espionage. They've been held in Greek custody for several months. Prosecutors say their activities included illegally monitoring Coast Guard radio channels. Amnesty International has called the case farcical. A state of emergency is in effect in the Canadian province of British Columbia, which has been hit by floods and landslides. Hundreds of members of the armed forces have been deployed. Roads have been washed away and Canada's biggest port, Vancouver, has been largely cut off. These residents are in Abbotsford, one of the worst affected areas.
I got an evacuation notice on Monday and had to race out here to start clearing stuff out of my house and take what I could with me. And this area here was absolutely chaotic yesterday. Absolutely everything was underwater. The street was flooded out. There was motorboats flying around in the park. It was just completely unreal.
A lot of people affected. I feel particularly sorry for our farmers around this area. We had one friend that we checked on today, but he's staying in the barn for the night. He doesn't want to leave the animals.
World news from the BBC. Polish officials say they detained more than 100 migrants overnight who tried to cross the border from Belarus. The Defence Ministry in Warsaw said Belarusian troops had probably damaged the fence and accused them of forcing the migrants to throw stones at Polish soldiers. President Alexander Lukashenko denies that Belarus has been trying to destabilise the European Union by encouraging people to make the crossing. The Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has signed into law a new refugee bill that allows asylum seekers easier access to education and to help them earn a living. It comes just 6 months before a planned shutdown by the authorities of 2 camps holding more than 500,000 refugees. The authorities say the camps have been used as breeding grounds for terrorists. India's top court has quashed a controversial High Court decision that cleared a man of sexually assaulting a child because there had been no skin-to-skin contact. Supreme Court judges said the ruling in Mumbai in January had legitimised sexual abuse. Dozens of girls from Afghanistan identified as promising footballers have arrived in the UK after an extraordinary rescue effort. Here's Caroline Hawley.
A sense of excitement as the girls and their families prepared for takeoff. The teenagers, who were mostly from the provinces of Afghanistan, had fled in terror to Kabul as the Taliban took over their towns. Some have since had their homes burned down, and there'd been death threats. But the girls missed the mass Western airlift in August and had to go into hiding as frantic efforts were made to get them out. Pakistan agreed to take them in, but only temporarily. A former manager of Afghanistan's national women's team, who helped coordinate their rescue, said the next goal was to help them start new footballing careers in the UK.
Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now to end the news, here's a recap of the leads. Opposition leader Joseph Harmon has given thumbs down to the government's proposed amendments to one of Guyana's electoral laws. For the first time in history of the People's National Congress reform, a sitting leader has not been nominated for any position. And in regional news, an embattled member of parliament of the ruling Antiguan party has secured an injunction against his party to debar and replace him. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio Newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.